The Steam Deck just got one of its biggest updates yet. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Deck Ready. I'm back in the studio for this week's news video. We've got some great stuff to talk about today, like the top 10 games for Steam Deck in January, Ubisoft launching their games on Steam and immediately breaking them for Steam Deck, a new update that can turn your PC into a Steam Deck, and a huge new update for the world's greatest handheld. So let's start out with the top 10 Steam Deck games for January. Number 1, we have Elden Ring. Number 2, we have Vampire Survivors. Number 3, we have The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Number 4, Stardew Valley. Number 5 is Hades. Number 6 is Red Dead Redemption 2. Number 7 is Persona 5 Royal. Number 8 is GTA 5. Number 9 is Cyberpunk 2077. And number 10 is The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim Special Edition. There's actually 20 games on this list, so the next 10 are Fallout 4, The Binding of Isaac, Valheim, Brotato, Slay the Spire, God of War, Monster Hunter Rise, Horizon Zero Dawn, No Man's Sky, and number 20 is Disney's Dreamlight Valley. Honestly, like I usually say, if you ever made me choose the top 20 games on the Steam Deck in exchange for my life, I would probably get like 18 of these right. These are all great handheld games. Red Dead Redemption 2 I see on the subreddit all the time. Elden Ring is like the marquee title for the Steam Deck ever since it came out, and Valve basically fixed it for PC. Stardew Valley and Dreamlight Valley are like the perfect games for the Steam Deck. They scratch that city building farming game itch that a lot of people have. And Persona 5 Royal, of course, is perfect for the Steam Deck because it'll bring you back to the excellent days of Persona 4 Golden on the Vita. It's not a top 20 title, but the game I've been having so much fun playing on the Steam Deck lately is Wasteland 3. I had it in my Steam account, I downloaded it, and this runs incredibly well on the device. You can leave it at 800p, set it to medium-high settings, and just hold the frame rate at 30 FPS, and it is an awesome experience. If you're looking for a great CRPG with good turn-based combat, a cool story, some good jokes. My favorite faction in the game so far is the Gippers. They are a cult that worships AI version of Ronald Reagan, and they have all of the Wastelands oil. So yeah, it's like $39.99 on Steam full price. The first DLC, the Steel Town one, is supposedly pretty good. The second DLC apparently is not. I'm sure you could get this game cheaper elsewhere, but yeah, this is one of my main Steam Deck games. And also the new update for Hitman 3 that repackages it as World of Assassination. That is a great title for Steam Deck as well. It's not like a fast-paced shooter or anything like that. It's a slow, stealthier type of game, and it looks and runs great on the device. So if you're looking for two games that aren't on this top 20 list, those are two I recommend wholeheartedly. The next news story I have for you guys is that the new version of Steam Big Picture is out now for everyone, whether you're using the beta or the stable version of Steam. Now, this is good because for the past 4 months, while it was in open beta, you had to go through a few tricks to actually launch into Steam. So when it first dropped, you basically had to make a new shortcut on your desktop, and in the target of the properties, you had to put like -sign new big picture mode. And that was kind of frustrating because if you used that shortcut, it would always launch into big picture mode. Then they made it so you could replace the old big picture mode with that, and that's what I've been using for a while now. But now, if you have regular Steam, you can launch into big picture mode and your computer will basically turn into a Steam Deck, which is awesome. This interface is obviously really good if you're playing on a TV, which is something I do all the time. My main PC game right now is Death Stranding. I was playing it on the Steam Deck, but the director's cut runs like garbage when you get to certain parts of the game, so switched over to my main PC. I would also be playing Dead Space on my PC, but I ended up having to refund it and switch to PlayStation 5 because for some reason, every game that releases on PC now has massive stuttering issues and trouble running at 60 FPS, and the VSync is broken, so you have to use the NVIDIA control panel VSync. So I'm done playing tech support for devs that release their games broken and unfinished, switched over to PS5, and everything has been great. But yeah, this is kind of a bittersweet moment for me because I still remember when Big Picture first came out and I was so excited for it. I didn't really get into PC gaming until I got my first computer of my own. I made my dad look all over Craigslist for a 15-inch MacBook Pro with a dedicated graphics card, right? Like, because we were one of those families that never bought anything new. He found a kid who dropped out of Michigan State and had his computer up on Craigslist so he could make some money. It was brand new, and I installed Windows on it right away. Windows 7, and the first game I bought was Call of Duty Black Ops. And then as I became more and more of a PC gamer as time went on, I built my own gaming rig. I had it in college, and then junior year, they launched Steam Big Picture mode, and it was really cool. The first game I played on it was Costume Quest right around Halloween, and I thought it was so sweet to have my wired Xbox 360 controller plugged into my PC and have the whole interface up on my TV like it was an actual game console. Unfortunately, because of the Steam controller kind of flopping and also the Steam machines kind of flopping, Valve pretty much stopped working on Big Picture mode, but some stuff from Big Picture mode mode made its way over to the Steam Deck, like the split keyboard, which is awesome. And now the SteamOS sort of interface is making its way back to Windows PCs. So if you want that experience that you have playing on your Steam Deck with a lot of added stutter, you can now use the brand new big picture mode, and I highly recommend it. Next up, we have to talk about this whole Ubisoft situation, because it's honestly reminding me a lot of what just happened a couple months ago with EA and their new launcher, where they updated it and it broke every game pretty much. So if you guys haven't heard, Ubisoft realized that no one's gonna buy games that are exclusively released on the Epic Games Store. They're in pretty dire straits when it comes to games as a whole, really, but on the PC, I'm sure they've noticed how much their sales took a hit when they moved over to the Epic Games Store exclusively, right? Like the whole idea there was that, oh, we sell a lot of our games on Steam, there's a 30% cut we have to give to Valve, we're gonna take away some of their revenue by heading over to the Epic Games Store. Valve will realize how big of a hit they take in the wallet without Ubisoft, and then we can renegotiate a deal with them to not give them 30%, and as we're now seeing, that has failed miserably. So every couple weeks for the past month or so, Ubisoft has been slowly trickling out games like The Division 2, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, Watch Dogs Legion, and Immortals Fenyx Rising on Steam, and they do it at a pretty hefty discount. Like I just bought Ghost Recon Breakpoint for just $24 with all the DLC, and for the most part, every game that they've launched has worked just fine, maybe with a little bit of tweaking on the Steam Deck. Like I put 10 or 20 hours already into Ghost Recon Breakpoint, and it's actually been a really nice experience on the handheld, which is surprising for Ubisoft. But the unfortunate thing is, all of these games, when you launch them for the first time, they install the Ubisoft launcher, and that's where the real crapshoot starts, right? Like with Ghost Recon Breakpoint, for example, because that's the most recent game I played, you have to launch the game once, let it crash, then go to your desktop and change a text file to get the game to work again, and that really came down to the Ubisoft launcher and the BattleEye anti-cheat system that the game was using. And because that launcher is required for all of these games, if Ubisoft updates it, that can break the games, which is exactly what just happened. Thankfully, like with so many other games that break on the Steam Deck, Valve was on the case immediately, and they pushed an update to Proton Experimental. So if you're playing any Ubisoft game, all you have to do is go to Properties, force the compatibility of Proton Experimental, and as long as your experimental Proton is up to date, the game should work just fine as they did before. But with games like Ghost Recon Breakpoint or even The Division 2, which didn't work at launch and then got an update, there are a couple tweaks you might have to do or repeat with this new Proton version enabled. Obviously, we have to give Valve a ton of credit here for fixing these Ubisoft games just like they did with the EA games, but they've also done a good job fixing the new Dead Space remake, which had an issue at launch where if you pulled up the map in the game, it would immediately crash on your Steam Deck. And also the game would hard crash and freeze on the device all the time, which basically made it unplayable, but both Valve and EA Motive were able to fix this version of the game and get it working relatively quickly on the Steam Deck, which is the best part about this device, right? Like the whole issue of using Linux and SteamOS 3.0 means that when you update these launchers, you can effectively break the games, and it's cool that Valve is actually on this, right? Like they could totally just throw their hands up in the air and say, hey, this is on the developers, they gotta figure this out. Unfortunately, if they don't do that, this game isn't going to be playable on Steam Deck. But it seems like every single time, no matter how big or small the game is, if people go on Twitter and ask the people who are vocal at Valve about fixing these things, there's a hot fix pushed out within a day. And I think that's really cool customer support. And honestly, when the Steam Deck was coming out and we saw all these news stories about Valve abandoning hardware and giving up on things that aren't immediately successful at launch, that put a picture in people's minds that they were just going to abandon the Steam Deck. And here we are a year later and they haven't. They've really done a good job supporting the hell out of it and making sure that any game people want to play, they do their best to get it working. So here's my annual begging. I'm getting on my soapbox. Please, Valve, talk to Sony, talk to Bungie, talk to whoever you got to talk to get Destiny 2 working on the Steam Deck. I want to play this game on the Steam Deck, and I know so many other people out there do as well. But yeah, if you've been playing the myriad of Ubisoft games that have dropped onto Steam over the past month or so, and you're realizing that they're not working right now, all you have to do is set each individual game to use Proton Experimental, and eventually that fix will make its way into the Proton stable build. And once that happens, you can take that compatibility off, because sometimes, since Experimental gets updated so much, even new updates to Experimental will break old fixes. So as soon as this gets into the stable version of Proton, you're going to want to switch back to that. I'm really crossing my fingers that the next game is Riders Republic, because that looked really cool and I really want to play it on the Steam Deck. And I definitely saved the biggest story for last here, because Valve just released a huge update for the Steam Deck, like absolutely massive. I've got all the patch notes right here, so I'm just going to pick a few out that I think are really cool. It's a huge update, like I just mentioned, so if you want to see, I'll leave the GamingOnLinux article down in the bottom of the description. So the first big fix that came came along with this update is that when a game like Hades, for example, has multiple launch options, you can make the Steam Deck remember which version you select so that every time you start the game, it won't show that menu. It got a little annoying with Hades because it has a specific Steam Deck menu there, like it'll say DirectX version or Vulkan version, and then there's a little Steam Deck in parentheses. So now you'll just have to select that once and you can check a box to say, remember my selection. And then every time you start the game up from then on, it'll just start into the version you want. As someone who uses PayPal for their Steam account, I'm really excited that they say they've fixed some issues with payment providers. I'm hoping PayPal is the payment provider they're talking about because it got really frustrating after a while not being able to buy games on my Steam Deck. Like when you would go into your cart, right? It'll say, hey, you got to open up PayPal to complete this purchase. And then the window either doesn't open or never loads. So the fact that they're specifically talking about some payment providers, I'm hoping that means PayPal. I'll have to check it out the next time I buy a Steam game and update you guys. They're adding up and down cursors to the keyboard, which is great. It sounds like a small change, but I promise it's awesome because I've had to edit a lot of text documents and settings files on the Steam Deck. And if you're doing it on the actual handheld, the keyboard covers up like half the screen. So you'll have to scroll down, but to use the mouse to scroll down on the window you're typing into, you have to close the keyboard. So now you have a down arrow and an up arrow so you can get to where you want to be with the cursor without closing the keyboard, using the mouse, scrolling down so you can see what you're typing and all that. That is an awesome fix. Thank you, Valve. There's like 30 or 40 big updates to the Steam input menu that just make it look and run a whole lot faster. They've also added in support for a lot of different specific controllers, from the Xbox Elite controller to the Switch Pro controller to some third-party controllers, and they should hopefully sooner rather than later have some support for the DualSense Edge. Right now, you can connect the DualSense Edge to the Steam Deck and it'll work just fine. I showed it off on the Deck Ready Twitter last week. But the weird thing I noticed is that if you go into the controller settings and see the layout, it actually shows something that looks like the Switch Pro controller. So hopefully, since they're adding in all these other controllers, they add in the DualSense Edge so that when you connect the DualSense Edge to your Steam Deck, you at least see the shape of a DualSense instead of the shape of a Switch Pro controller. Like honestly, this list is massive. There's like hundreds of changes here and I don't even know which ones to highlight. So if you want to know everything else that came along with this Steam Deck update, I'll leave it linked down in the description. But if you just Google new Steam Deck update, the GamingOnLinux article will just come right up and you can check it out for yourself. The biggest update we're getting in the future that I'm super excited for is one that's going to fix stuttering. So the example that I've seen used is that every time a new season of Apex Legends starts, the shaders that are already compiled basically get cleared and your Steam Deck has to compile those shaders all over again. And it happens when you launch into the map in your first game that's played. So when you're dropping into the giant Apex Legends map, the frame rate will drop to like 1 FPS, which isn't great in a game where you're floating through the air and have to decide where you're going to land. So the first game in a new season of Apex Legends on the Steam Deck is basically a wash because you're not going to be able to know where you're landing. You should just literally start a match, let the stutters happen, get to the ground, and then quit, and your next match will have all the shaders compiled and you'll be good to go. But there's an update coming in the future that basically fixes the way that shaders are compiled for the first time in a game, and it'll do it a lot quicker on the fly. I think it was like something like 15,000% of an increase where you're going to see those stutters happen for milliseconds versus full on hard 5 to 10 second hitches that load in all the stuff. So the stuttering will still be there. It'll just happen a lot quicker and be out of the way. I'm obviously all for that because like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, shader stutter is like the bane of PC gaming right now, mainly because it happens a lot with DirectX 12 and Unreal Engine 4, and every game in the world right now is using Unreal Engine 4. And even though the fix for that is to include a short wait at the beginning of the game when you launch it for the first time that just compiles all the shaders, no developer seems to want to include that in their game. So we're just stuck with everything happening for the first time and causing a 1-second stutter. If you're sensitive to this, it basically makes every game unplayable on PC, not an exaggeration. And if you're like a lot of the reviewers who got Dead Space on PC before the game came out and you can't see this, it's not really an issue for you. But for a lot of people out there, it is a huge problem. So I'm glad that we're getting closer and closer to this being eliminated. The last big hurdle we have to get to is SteamOS 3 being available on Windows PCs. Because at that point, all you'll have to do is wait a couple days for everyone who's playing these games to have their shaders uploaded to Steam. They'll download automatically, and then you won't have to deal with shader compilation stutter ever again.